And I think you don't need to be a historian to look around and see things are not right. And we are giving this away. And I can't in good conscience let this be what I hand my children when it's time for me to go. I mean, it's just, and there's nothing that I don't think that we should be willing to give up. And we should be willing to do whatever it takes for this. And I really believe if you just speak the truth, it's offensive to people that don't have it. And it is offensive, and it does. You know, when you talk about the impact of political correctness in this whole thing, just stop participating in it. We're all participating in it, whether we know it or not. We hold our tongues sometimes in certain crowds or around certain friends because we don't want them to call us names or kind of get on our case. You know, when people say, "Hey, you offend me," you know, I just say, "I don't care." I don't care that that's offensive to you because the truth isn't necessarily offensive. Yes, ma'am.
I was just going to say, just to add to that, if you ask any person who has been involved in this fight, in which it is, for some time, not only is it because of our kids, but it's because that's how close we are. I mean, we know that we're that close and getting closer every single day to seeing their goals come to fruition. And so, not just because we have kids, but because we know our kids are going to be affected by it in sometime in the near future. So, it's the future is imminent and extremely close.
And I do want to say something because I think it's important. It's easy to sit in these briefs and just let fear drape over you. And that's not who we are as Americans. You know, the whole idea of when we came here, the whole idea of how we forged this nation, you know, it's an amazing story. And the founders knew it. And I mean, you want to talk about what can you do? You're like, man, I don't want to talk about this Islamic stuff. How about we just teach our kids the Declaration and the Constitution? Because the two aren't, you know, I hear people say, well, you know, the Declaration, it's really the Constitution. Well, that's what people who don't believe in America say. The Declaration is the ideal. That's the ideal. The Constitution was the first legitimate whack at it. The founders understood that it was more important to get that Constitution out, even though they fell short of the ideal, than to let this idea of America go by the wayside. Because they believed that God ordained this. They didn't think they had the right to do that because they were called to a duty. But you can't talk like that. I mean, the idea that today you can't pray in a high school at a graduation because somehow that's offensive, that is exactly 180 degrees opposite of what the founders intended and what we did in this country until the 1940s. It's just outrageous.
While you were up there talking, I found something on the Shia multimedia website, and it is under a document titled Islamic Law. I'm just going to read the first sentence because you spoke on this and you talked about how they've got, you know, 1 million different forms of Islamic law, and you know they virtually all mean the same thing. This is from the Islamic website. Though there are important differences between 12 Imam Shiaism and Sunnism on the level of the principles of the religion, the Usul al-Din, on the level of the Sharia and fiqh or jurisprudence, there are surprisingly few places where Shia or Jafari law differs from all four Sunni schools, the Hanafi, Hanbali, Maliki, and Shafi'i. So that's from their own website.
You can find that on almost all those websites.
Tons of them out there.
You can find that in the Iranian Constitution too.
Yeah, and the other thing I was going to let you know too, the reliance of the travel, all those of the traveler, all of those links again are at tuw-ga.com. Tons of links, and I've actually sat here listening to him. I've added about 10 more links to the website that will bring you to Islamic law. Doctrine, text, and things like that, that you can go read it for yourself. You don't have to just believe what John says, and I challenge you not to. You do need to look at it for yourselves. I think we probably have time for maybe just a couple of very quick questions, and then we're going to take a break, and then Tom is going to start his segment.
Is everybody worn out? Oh, you got a question? Yes, ma'am.
This is my first exposure to any of this, so it's a very simple question.
Hey, go on.
Under coexist, where you have that,
Yes.
I saw something about an organization for pastors or some ministerial. Could you just tell me, is that part of what's being covered up? Or, I mean, is that a front for one of the Muslim Brotherhood organizations? It just sounds like it's a good organization. Is that what that is?
I'll go back and look at that for you, but there are quite a number of evangelical, Christian, Protestant, Catholic organizations working directly with the Muslim Brotherhood.
Well, Rick Warren of the Saddleback Baptist Church, one of the largest evangelical churches in the United States, is a listed speaker on the ISNA and ICNA website, if that tells you anything.
Yeah, Rick Warren, he's a pretty big player in that world. And but you do have, and you've got a lot of pastors. It doesn't mean, there are ways to do this where you're not way out in front as a pastor, so you're bringing heat on your church, but you should at least be informing your flock of what in my opinion, you got to speak the truth to them.
I have a question for you. This is your first experience here. How many other people have first experience here?
Mark is asking, how many of you is this your first experience with the threat of Islam?
Yeah. Does this all sound like crazy conspiracy, a crazy conspiracy, or just something far out there? I mean, something that you should investigate and check out? I highly advise you to do so, by the way.
It doesn't sound crazy to me. It sounds like, why haven't I heard about this before? And I can't wait.
Yeah, that's the question. Why haven't you heard
this? Ask my friends,
Right. So that was right.
Yep. Yes, ma'am.
I know since 9/11, I have read everything I could to educate myself about Islam or just different. So I try to educate myself. So I think every American has that duty. Why was our Twin Towers struck? Why was the USS Cole blown up years ago and our country did not do anything? I've been questioning our country since for many years. And finally, actually, we're getting some answers. If people, our government's maybe not turning as deaf of an ear as they did for 30 or 40 years. So,
Yeah.
it's a duty.
I mean, we're finally, they're starting to get some breakthrough there. I have a couple comments, because I just remembered that a couple people asked questions during the break. When it talks to a lot of you want to know what specifically can I do? And I've mentioned a few things, but there are really some good things you can do. First, when you go in to talk to your elected officials, whether they're local, whether they're your U.S. representatives or senators, people get so frustrated by hearing this information. They go in, they're like, are you aware of this? The Muslims try to take over America, and this is what's going on, and bah, And if you're sitting there in your office, you're like, if you've never heard this before, you're like, I tell you what, let me get my scheduler. Let's get a longer. Just clearly, I'm going to need more time to hear this. And then as soon as you walk out there, like, don't ever let that person back in the house. Right? But if you go in and you say, I have some concerns. This group operates in my neighborhood. The largest Hamas trial in U.S. history says this group is a Hamas entity, is a Muslim Brotherhood entity, and this is what they're seeking to do. What do you know about this? I would like an answer from you. Give them an opportunity to dig in. And when they come back and give you the wrong answer, well, then you lean in a little bit. You say, no, that's actually, here's the facts. And they come back and give you the right answer, like, wow, it looks like there might be something here. What do you know? And then maybe you create a dialogue. Just a little thought as your approach goes. When you look at the total picture from a military standpoint, we're looking at an insurgency in the United States. Necessarily,
Amen.
The answer in a counterinsurgency by our own warfighting doctrine and free civilians, this gets real simple real quick, is at the local level. A counterinsurgency is waged at the local level. At the county level and at the town level is where you need to be working. Don't worry about going to 7 other states and let other organizations. You worry about your neighborhood, your churches, your synagogues in your area, and your police department. Now, most police departments really don't take kindly to civilians wandering in and trying to tell them what's what in the zoo. Okay? But everybody in this room knows somebody or has a relative who's a cop. You're a friend or a friend of your brother's or a friend of that. That's where you start making the inroads. the guy at dinner and say, I heard this, and I did research, and this, are you aware of this? Boom. And start talking to them about it, start a dialogue.
And you also said
That's-
city council and school boards.
As city councils, school boards, look at what your children got in their schools. And I have a friend of mine was doing a project for a graduate degree, and there was a section in there about the Crusades. And I went in, it was all nonsense. If you don't understand the history of the Crusades, you're like, oh wow, that's pretty bad. They're like, well, but that's actually not historically true. So what you need to do is go to the professor and say, hey, can you give me a book that's actually not full of crap? It actually has things called facts and historical truths that we have the documents to back up, actually. That would be nice. Okay? Because this here says the Crusades were an unprovoked act of violence from Christians against the Muslim world. And that's nuts. That's bomb
There's a lot of
cuckoo
adults
nuts.
who believe that to this day. I mean, people that I went to school with who, that's what they were taught, that's what they believe. And when you try to counter that and tell them, well, actually, I mean, they look at you as if you're blowing smoke.
And I would encourage you, what I'm going to do, I've sent it to these guys before, but it's been updated. I've got a packet of about 40 items that you're going to get from people who don't understand this, comments or questions, like, well, there's violence in the Bible too, or Jews have their halakha law, or whatever the comment is, you're going to get thrown back at you, and how you respond to that. And I'm going to give that to Ann. So those of you, I'm assuming, are all on, if you're not on some kind of email distribution, get with them, and I'll make sure you have that accessible, because that's very helpful. But here's the kind of the big point about this local thing. Local town councils, local county councils are not going to take action unless you, the citizen, make them. And a cop and a police chief are not going to do anything if the town and county councils are going to just come down on it. So you have two things here. One, so that you all got to get educated. You got to put pressure on your business leaders, your community leaders, yourselves to mobilize your city and town councils and your county councils. And then you got to get them through your own connections or whatever to start getting this into your police, your local and state police, your fusion center and all that. Now, how does this completely tie in? Well, at the county level, let me just say this. In the United States, the most powerful law enforcement officer is a sheriff. You aware of that? The Attorney General of the United States can come to your county and say, I want you to do this, and the sheriff can say, no, I'm not doing that. Not doing it. My county, as a matter of fact, you're not even allowed into my county. How about that? And you have a lot of good sheriffs out there who, if they understood this, and they kind of got it.
Which, by the way, all candidates for the sheriff of Chatham County were invited.
So I would encourage you to think about some of these things at the local level. Now, I'm going to be here the rest of the day and this evening. If you have questions or anything, I encourage you to do that. And I just want to promote one thing. We just stood up. I just stood up a website called UnderstandingTheThreat.com, and there is an 80-minute DVD that puts all this together, so you can watch it over and over. And then I'm going to have something that I'll make available to some of you here. I'm getting ready to release a Muslim Brotherhood handbook, and that will kind of, and not too short, but pretty short, sum up all of this into something you can have your hands on.